Ellie is really working the camera. Anyway, hello and welcome to or back to my channel. I'm Kit and here we talk about harmful nonsense. And today we're going to learn about why it can be beneficial to marry an older man as a woman. Before we get into it, I would like to note that I don't know the author of this article, and these are my thoughts and opinions on the content she puts out for public consumption. That being said, thank you for clicking on this video, and I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. Links to my socials and Patreon are below, along with sources and resources. And now, on to the reason we're all here. Last week, I got a new entry in my submission form for content ideas, and just so everyone knows, I get really excited when someone sends something in, so the submission form is linked below, just saying. And if anyone has sent something in and I haven't done a video on it yet, even if a video doesn't get made in a timely manner, it does put things on my radar that might not have been there before. Please don't feel ignored. I do read and note everything. Anyway, this was the request. I would love to see you react to the viral article, The Case for Marrying an Older Man, published in The Cut. I always somehow manage to miss things that go viral. Am I not online enough? I am glad it's not TikTok. And to the person that made the suggestion, thank you for the suggestion and also for the compliment. I needed something quick to film because I have plans this weekend, which if you're watching this was last weekend, and what's easier than a simple reaction? Right, well, this person is a prolific writer, 12 pages, and though I obviously am not generally in favor of age gap relationships, the length alone made me raise an eyebrow. But it is lengthy and I do still have to edit this, so let's get into it. Thank you, Ellie. And if you hear anything weird, that is because Ellie is right here and she is purring because she just loves her mama. Anyway, I'm editing this right now and I just wanted to jump in real quick and say a lot of this is just my reaction in the moment, but there's also going to be a few edits. And I'm very sorry for how much I say like. I had no idea, and this is why I script my videos. In the summer, in the south of France, my husband and I like to play, rather badly, the lottery. We take long, scorching walks to the village, gratuitous beauty, gratuitous heat, kicking up dust and languid debates over how we'd spend such an influx. I purchase scratch-offs, jackpot tickets, scraping the former with euro coins in restaurants too fine for that. I never cash them in, nor do I check the winning numbers, for I already won something like the lotto with its gifts and its curses when he married me. Okay. Interesting to compare marriage to winning the lottery, but I guess it's probably good to feel that way about your spouse. Hopefully he reciprocates that feeling. He is 10 years older than I am, which is not as bad as I thought it was going to be, because when I hear older men, I think 15, 20 years, not 10, but okay. I chose him on purpose, not by chance. Do people usually choose their spouses by chance? Okay. As far as life decisions go, on balance, I recommend it. Marrying him, marriage in general, recommend what? When I was 20 and a junior at Harvard College, a series of great ironies began to mock me. I could study all I wanted, prove myself as exceptional as I liked, and still my fiercest advantage remained so universal it deflated my other plans. My youth, the newness of my face and body, compellingly effortless, cruelly fleeting. I shared it with the average, idle young woman shrugging down the street. The thought, when it descended on me, jolted my perspective the way a falling leaf can make you look up. I could diligently craft an ideal existence over years and years of sleepless nights in industry, or I could just marry it early. Okay. So naturally, I began to lug a heavy suitcase of books each Saturday to the Harvard Business School to work on my Nabokov paper. In one cavernous, well-appointed room sat approximately 50 of the planet's most suitable bachelors. I would like to know what she considers a suitable bachelor. Obviously someone who is unmarried, but what makes a bachelor suitable? Because I think I know the answer, but I don't like to assume. Oh God. Oh no. Okay, here we go. Ellie, close your ears, you can't hear this. I had high breasts, most of my aches, plausible deniability when it came to purity, a flush ponytail, a pep in my step that had yet to run out. Oh my God. I don't know who needs to hear this, but if someone marries you because of where your breasts sit or how many eggs you have, or if you lie about your purity, or if your hair isn't flush, does she mean lush? Anyway, but if they marry you for those reasons, that's not what I would call a stable foundation for a marriage. So what happens when your eggs run out or are no longer viable? What happens when your breasts sag? What happens, well, obviously, when you have sex with this person, you're no longer going to be able to say you're pure. So what happens if your hair thins? What happens if you get really sick and you lose your hair? Okay, anyway, apologies to progress, but older men still desired those things. So as someone who's dated an older man before, granted I was 29 and he was 43? Yeah, I don't think he was, maybe I was just being naive, but I'm pretty sure he dated me because he liked me. It's really hard to date someone just for their looks, at least in my opinion. Maybe I'm just not shallow enough for that, but I don't know. This is really weird. Editing Kit jumping in to note that progress isn't about desire. It's about realizing that marrying teenage girls off to middle-aged men is a terrible thing to do. But setting that aside, if older men still desire youth, beauty, fertility, what happens when you marry someone for those things and they age? Will the man in question somehow stop desiring those things? Or will the current wife be traded in for a younger version? I could not understand why my female classmates did not join me given their intelligence. Well, maybe they wanted to be loved, appreciated, considered, known for their intelligence instead of their looks. Maybe they were hoping to marry a man who was more interested in their brains than their beauty or their youthfulness. Anyway, each time I reconsidered the project, it struck me as more reasonable. Why ignore our youth when it amounted to a superpower? Why assume the burdens of womanhood, its too quick to vanish upper hand, but not its brief benefits at least? This still doesn't make any sense to me because if all that stuff is what she considers a benefit of womanhood, and she also considers it fleeting, divorce for now is still legal, so how does she figure they're going to remain married even when she's no longer the youngest woman on offer? Wouldn't she assume that he'd be on to the next youngest woman? Okay. Perhaps it came easier to avoid the topic wholesale than to accept that women really do have a tragically short window of power and reason enough to take advantage of that fact while they can. Is this classically Abby in disguise? Because this is sounding the whole feminists lied. Women's true power is through men. Being beautiful can give you benefits, as I know from the comments on my Mrs. Midwest videos, where people just refuse to believe that her beliefs could not be all that wholesome because she's attractive. So yeah, sure, there is a benefit to being beautiful, but I'm not really sure you should build a long-term relationship on beauty and youth because this person has said how many times so far that it's fleeting, but okay, whatever. Okay. As for me, I liked history, Victorian novels, knew of imminent female pitfalls from all the books I'd read, vampiric boyfriends, labor at the office and in the hospital, expected simultaneously a decline in status as we aged like a looming eclipse. I'd have disliked being called calculating, but I had, like all women, a calculator in my head. I thought it silly to ignore its answers when they pointed to an unfairness for which we really ought to have been preparing. I was competitive by nature, an English literature student with all the corresponding major ambitions and minor prospects. Great American novel, email job. What's an email job? A little Bovarist, frantic for new places and ideas, to travel here, to travel there, to be in the room where things happened. I resented the callow boys in my class who lusted after a particular socially sanctioned type on campus. Thin and sexless, emotionally detached and socially connected, the opposite of me. Restless one Saturday night, I slipped on a red dress and snuck into a graduate school event, coiling an HDMI cord around my wrist as proof of some technical duty. I danced, I drank for free, until one of the organizers asked me to leave. I called and climbed into an Uber. Then I promptly climbed out of it. For there he was, emerging from the revolving doors. Brown eyes, curved lips, immaculate jacket. I went to him, asked him for a cigarette. A date, days later, a second one, where I discovered he was a person. Potentially my favorite kind. Funny, clear-eyed, brilliant, on intimate terms with the universe. This probably isn't intentional, but she's making herself and this man sound very pretentious. I used to love men like men love women. That is, not very well, and with a hunger driven only by my own inadequacies. Not him. In those early days, I spoke fondly of my family, stocked the fridge with his favorite pasta, folded his clothes more neatly than I ever have since. I wrote his mother a thank you note for hosting me in his native France, something befitting a daughter-in-law. It worked. I meant it. After graduation and my fellowship at Oxford, I stayed in Europe for his career and married him at 23. Okay, I mean, like, my mother married at 20, one of my aunts married at 18, one of my cousins married at, 22? No, 21. So I'm not okay, 23. I mean, granted, that means he was 33 if he's 10 years older, which is sketchy to me because, well, when I was 33, I didn't have anything in common with a 25-year-old, let alone a 23-year-old, but okay, we still have a lot more to go, so of course, I just fell in love. Romances have a setting I'd only intervened to place myself well. Okay. Mainly, I spotted the precise trouble of being a woman ahead of time, tried to surf it instead of letting it drown me on principle. I had grown bored of discussions of fair and unfair, equal or unequal, and preferred instead to consider a thing called ease. Okay. The reception of a particular age gap relationship depends on its obviousness. The greater and more visible the difference in years and status between a man and a woman, the more it strikes others as transactional. Yeah, I can see that. People think the man is going for youth and beauty. People think the woman is going for, well, money. Transactional thinking in relationships is both as American as it gets, well, that's depressing, and the least kosher subject in the American romantic lexicon. When a 50-year-old man and a 25-year-old woman walk down the street, the questions form themselves inside of you. They make you feel cynical and obscene. How good of a deal is that? Which party is getting the better one? Would I take it? He is older. Income rises with age, so we assume he has money, at least relative to her, at minimum, more connections and experience. She has supple skin, energy, sex. Maybe she gets a Birkin.
A Birkin bag for Rory.
Maybe he gets a baby long after his prime. The sight of their entwined hands throws a lucid light on the calculations each of us makes in love to varying degrees of denial. You could get married in the most romantic place in the world, like I did, and you would still have to sign a contract. 20 and 30 is not like 30 and 40. Some freshness to my features back then, some clumsiness in my bearing, warped our decade in the eyes of others to an uncrossable gulf. Well, I don't think it's that she looked too young or that she was a bit clumsy about herself. I think it's just the vast amount of experience between a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old. There's definitely a power imbalance there. So I don't think I don't think people are wrong to question that. Perhaps this explains the anger we felt directed at us at the start of our relationship. People seem to take us very, very personally. I recall a hellish car ride with a friend of his who began to castigate me in the back seat in tones so low that only I could hear him. He told me, "You wanted a rich boyfriend. You chased and snuck into parties." He spared me the insult of gold digger, but he drew, with other words, the outline for it. Most offended were the single older women, my husband's classmates. They discussed me in the bathroom at parties when I was in the stall. What does he see in her? What do they talk about? They were concerned about me. They wielded their concern like a bludgeon. They paraphrased without meaning to my favorite line from Nabokov's Lolita. You took advantage of my disadvantage, suspecting me of some weakness he in turn mined. It did not disturb them so much to consider that all relationships were trades. The trouble was the trade I'd made struck them as a bad one. I don't know how I feel about this, because if you're essentially gossiping about someone or lecturing someone, I'm not really sure what good you want to do. I think it'd be better if a trusted friend or family member spoke to him or her about their concerns, because this isn't gonna get you anywhere. It's just gonna make people criticizing people in certain ways just makes them band together more, oh, it's us against the world, like this gossip and this lecturing in the backseat of a car ride does. It just makes them feel persecuted and all the more strongly that what they're doing is right. The truth is, you can fall in love with someone for all sorts of reasons, tiny transactions, pluses and minuses, whose sum is your affection for each other, your loyalty, your commitment. The way someone picks up your favorite croissant, their habit of listening hard, what they do for you on your anniversary and your reciprocal gesture wrapped thoughtfully, the serenity they inspire, your happiness enlivening it. When someone says they feel unappreciated, what they really mean is you're in debt to them. When I think of same age, same stage relationships, what I tend to picture is a woman who is doing too much for too little. I'm 27 now, and most women my age have partners. These days, girls become partners quite young. A partner is supposed to be a modern answer to the oppression of marriage, the terrible feeling of someone looming over you, head of a household to which you can only ever be the neck. Necks are vulnerable. The problem with a partner, however, is if you're equal in all things, you compromise in all things, and men are too skilled at taking. There is a boy out there who knows how to floss because my friend taught him. Now he can chases college girls with fresh breath. I'm sorry, there's a man who knows how to floss because a girl taught him, not his dentist, not his parents? Okay. A boy married to my friend who doesn't know how to pack his own suitcase. She likes to do it for him. Yeah, my mom told me that when she began dating my dad, she would do his laundry, and his mother was so baffled by where his laundry went. And yeah, he wasn't living with his mother, but he did still have his mom do his laundry. Yep, that's my dad. That's my daddy. Anyway, there is a boy out there. Oh wait, I already read that part. A million boys who know how to touch a woman, who go to therapy because they were pushed, to learn fidelity, boundaries, decency, manners, to use a top sheet and act humanely beneath it, to call their mothers, match colors, bring flowers to a funeral, and inhale, exhale in the face of rage because some girl we know, some girl they probably don't speak to and will never, ever credit, took the time to teach him, all while she was working, raising herself, clawing up the cliff face of adulthood, hauling him at her own expense. Editing Kit wandering back in to say that, according to this person, parents, coaches, teachers, professionals themselves, no one teaches men anything. Everything they learned from a woman they dated in their 20s. And, per this person, we should take advantage of this fact and, when in our 20s, skip our fellow 20-somethings and go for the 30-somethings that have already been trained by women. And how does she figure this is helpful? In her world, if 20-something women stop training the 20-something men, they won't grow up into those 30-something preferable options. And if they don't stop, those 20-something women who take that time to train men into adulthood will still be, per the author, wasting their time. There are some folks who refuse to act like adults when adults, and in that case, just don't date them. Don't place the bar so low that you think it's acceptable to do everything for someone because, well, of course they never learned. And I'm very curious as to how this woman was apparently surrounded by men baffled by the basic necessities of adulthood. I find a post on Reddit where 5,000 men try to define a woman's touch. They describe raised flower beds, blankets, photographs of their loved ones, not hers, sprouting on the mantle overnight, candles, coasters, side tables, someone remembering to take lint out of the dryer, to give compliments. I wonder what these women are getting back. I imagine them like Cinderella's mice, scurrying around their sole proof of life, their contributions to a more central character. On occasion, I meet a nice couple who grew up together. They know each other with a fraternalism tender and alien to me. But I think of all my friends who failed at this, and I think, no, absolutely not, too risky. Riskier sometimes than an age gap. My younger brother is in his early 20s, handsome, successful, yes baby, but in many ways an endearing disaster. By his age, I had long since wizened up. He leaves his clothes in the dryer, takes out a single shirt, steams it for 3 minutes. His towel on the floor for someone else to retrieve. His lovely, same-age girlfriend is aching to fix these tendencies among others. She is capable beyond words. Statistically, they will not end up together. He moved into his first place recently, and she, the girlfriend, supplied him with a long, detailed list of things he needed for his apartment. Sheets, towels, hangers, a colander, which made me laugh. She picked out his couch. I will bet you anything she will fix his laundry habits. And if so, they will impress the next girl. Well, that's a little sad, because the basic adult things shouldn't be enough to impress someone. If they break up, she will never see that couch again and he will forget its story. I tell her when I visit because I like her, though I get in trouble for it. You shouldn't do so much for him, not for someone who is not stuck with you, not for any boy, not even for my wonderful brother. Does she really think her brother is wonderful? Because the way she speaks of him, she does not. And also I think it's kind of like human nature to want to help people out. Like if I see that someone doesn't know how to do something, I'll tell them or I'll show them, and it's not like I don't think of it as a transaction, and I think that's really unhealthy, and I think we consider way too many things transactional in the States as is, and we should not do that when dating or in friendship or really anything, really. The only transactional thing should be work. Paid employment, not like spending time with friends. Too much work had left my husband, by 30, jaded and uninspired. He'd burned out, but I could re-enchant things. I danced at restaurants when they played a song I liked. I turned grocery shopping into an adventure, pleased by what I provided. Ambitious, hungry, he needed someone smart enough to sustain his interest, but flexible enough in her habits to build them around his hours. I could. I do. Read myself occupied, make myself free, materialize beside him when he calls for me. In exchange, I left a lucrative but deadening spreadsheet job to write full-time without having to live like a writer. What is a spreadsheet job, and how do I get one? She said it's lucrative, so I'm interested. Let's see. I learned to cook a little and decorate somewhat poorly. Mostly I get to read, to walk around central London and Miami and think in delicious circles, to work hard when necessary, for free, and write stories for far less than minimum wage when I tally all the hours I take to write them. At 20, I had felt daunted by the project of becoming my ideal self, couldn't imagine doing it in tandem with someone, two raw lumps of clay trying to mold one another and only sullying things worse. I'd go on dates with boys my age and leave with the impression they were telling me not about themselves, but some person who didn't exist yet and on whom I was meant to bet regardless. I kind of wonder if she maybe always felt that she was better than other people, because I mean, outside of a few forays into dating older men, which feels really weird to say, I dated people within my age range, and like is that normal to feel like you're dating someone who doesn't exist yet? I mean, like, I didn't exist yet either by that measure. I was still discovering who I was, what I wanted, how I would get there. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds like she had a very specific idea of what she wanted from a young age, which is great, but you can't blame other people for not being there too. Anyway, back to the really long article. My husband struck me instead as so finished, formed, analyzable for compatibility. He bore the traces of other women who'd improved him, small but crucial basics like use a coaster, listen, don't give advice, young egos mellow into patience and generosity. My husband isn't my partner. He's my mentor, my lover, and, only in certain contexts, my friend. I'll never forget it, how he showed me around our first place like he was introducing me to myself. This is the wine you'll drink, where you'll keep your clothes, we vacation here, this is the other language we'll speak, you'll learn it, and I did. This is like really sad to me because part of the fun of being a human, of growing up, is discovering who you are. Not being told who you are, but discovering it yourself. Adulthood seemed a series of exhausting obligations. Though I guess if that was how she felt about adulthood, that would explain why she didn't want to figure herself out. She wanted someone else to figure herself out for her. Which then asks the question, is she really herself, or is she who he molded her to be? Okay, anyway, but his logistics ran so smoothly that he simply tapped mine on. I moved into his flat, onto his level, drag and drop, cleaner thrice a week, bills automatic. By opting out of a partnership in my 20s, I granted myself a kind of compartmentalized, liberating selfishness none of my friends have managed. Have managed? That makes it sound like they failed at something they should want, but like, I feel like most people do want partnerships. I am the work in progress, the party we worry about, a surprising dominance. When I searched for my first job at 21, we combined our efforts for my sake. He had wisdom to impart, contacts with whom he arranged coffees. We spent an afternoon laughing, drawing up earnest lists of my pros and cons. Highly sociable, sloppy math. Meanwhile, I took calls from a dear friend who had a boyfriend her age, both savagely ambitious, hyper-close, and entwined in each other's projects. If each was a startup, the other was the first hire, and intense dedication I found riveting. Yet every time she called me, I hung up with the distinct feeling that too much was happening at the same time. Both learning to please a boss, to forge more adult relationships with their families, to pay bills and taxes and hang prints on the wall. Neither had any advice to give, and certainly no stability. I pictured a three-legged race, two people tied together, and hobbling toward every milestone. Sounds a little, I don't know, something here rubs me the wrong way. It's like there are some people who like growing with their partner. Yes, they might end up growing in different directions and are no longer compatible, but that's not always a bad thing. A relationship running its course is not always a bad thing. I don't fool myself. My marriage has its cons. There are only so many times one can say thank you for splendid scenes, fine dinners, before the phrase starts to grate. I live in an apartment whose rent he pays, and that shapes the freedom with which I can ever be angry with him. So apparently he does do things that make her angry at times, but she has to be careful how she manages that anger because basically she owes him. He pays for her living, so she owes him. He doesn't have to hold it over my head, it just floats there, complicated usual shorthands to explain dissatisfaction like, you aren't being supportive lately. It's a Frenchism to say, take a decision, and from time to time I joke, from whom? Occasionally I find myself in some fabulous country at some fabulous party, and I think what a long way I have traveled, like a lucky cloud, and it is frightening to think of oneself as vapor. So it sounds kind of like this guy has money if she's like traveling around the world and going to fabulous parties, and if he has all these connections to hook her up with when it comes to job searching. And I just want to say that, for one, I would say probably that most older men do not have that kind of money. And also that a lot of older men can also be messy. They do not all have this like clockwork life where they can easily slot a woman in and decide who she is for her. A lot of them are still figuring themselves out. Mostly I worried that if he ever betrayed me and I had to move on, I would survive, but would find in my humor, preferences, the way I make coffee or the bed, nothing that he did not teach, change, mold, recompose, stamp with his initials, the way Renaissance painters hid in their paintings their faces among a crowd. I wonder if when they looked at their paintings, they saw their own faces first. But this is the wrong question if our aim is happiness. Like the other question on which I am expected to dwell. Who is in charge? The man who drives or the woman who put him there so she could enjoy herself? I sit in the car. In the painting, it would have taken me a corporate job and 20 years to paint alone, and my concern over who has the upper hand becomes as distant as the horizon, the one he and I made so wide for me. So when my parents got married, my mom was 20 and my dad was 26, and she told me a few months ago, at some point, the person who had the upper hand in the beginning, it will switch. Because, the person who's older is going to be the one to get older first, and then they're at the younger person's mercy. It is very sad, though, that she doesn't think she could have gotten anywhere on her own, especially when it sounds as though she was already born with privilege, and it was that privilege that she already had that enabled her to find another privileged person so they could build a privileged life together. Okay. To be a woman is to race against the clock in several ways until there is nothing left to be but run ragged. We try to put it off, but it will hit us at some point. That we live in a world in which our power has a different shape from that of men, a different distribution of advantage, ours a funnel, and theirs an expanding cone. A woman at 20 rarely has to earn her welcome. A boy at 20 will be turned away at the door. A woman at 30 may find a younger woman has taken her seat. A man at 30 will have invited her. I think back to the women in the bathroom, my husband's classmates. What was my relationship if not an incontrovertible sign of this unfairness? What was I doing in marrying older if not endorsing it? I had taken advantage of their disadvantage. So I just want to go ahead and say that getting older is a privilege. Unless you don't think being alive means anything, it is a privilege to get older. And this is some red pill talk right here, where a man has to earn his welcome, his worth, while the woman is just given it at birth. I had taken advantage of their disadvantage. I had preempted my own. After all, principled women are meant to defy unfairness, to show some integrity or denial, not plan around it like I had. These were driven women, successful, beautiful, capable. I merely possessed the one thing they had already lost. Yes, 30-year-old women are such old, ancient hags. Why are they even still alive? In getting ahead of the problem, had I pushed them down? If I hadn't, would it really have made any difference? When we decided we wanted to be equal to men... What? When we decided we wanted to be equal to men, it wasn't a decision, it's a simple fact. Women are not a lesser version of men, and they should not be treated as such. We worked when they worked, retired when they retired, had to squeeze pregnancy, children, and menopause somewhere impossibly in the margins. I have a friend in her late 20s who wears a mood ring. Interesting. These days, it is often red, flickering in the air like a siren when she explains her predicament to me. She has raised her fair share of same-age boyfriends. She has put her head down, worked laboriously alongside them too. At last, she is beginning to reap the dividends, earning the income to finally enjoy herself. But it is now exactly this precipice of freedom and pleasure that a time problem comes closing in. If she would like to have children before 35, she must begin her next profession, motherhood, rather soon, compromising inevitably her original one. The same-age partner, equally unsettled in his career, will take only the minimum time off she guesses. You have to talk to whoever you're dating. You have to find out if your goals, values, timelines, everything align. Don't just assume they will. Don't just guess. And of course, if you want something, someone else tells you they want something different, don't assume that you'll work it out later. Believe what they tell you and let them go if you don't agree on whatever lifestyle that you're talking about. Or else pay some costs which will come back to bite her. What? This does not sound like a partner to me. If he'd only take the minimum time off or pay some cost which will come back to bite her. Everything unfeelingly does. If she freezes her eggs to buy time, the decision and its logistics will burden her singly, and perhaps it will not work. Overlay the years a woman is supposed to establish herself in her career and her fertility window, and it's a perfect miserable circle. By midlife, women report feeling invisible, undervalued. It is a telling cliche that after all this, some husbands leave for a younger girl. So when is her time exactly? Maybe the time is to not base your worth, your life around men and your relation to them? Just a thought. For leisure, ease, liberty, there is no brand of feminism which achieved female rest. Welcome to capitalism. If women's problem in the 50s was a paralyzing malaise, now it is that they are too active, too capable, never permitted a vacation they didn't plan. It's not that our efforts to have it all were fated for failure, they simply weren't imaginative enough. Was it feminism that said women could and should have it all, or was that marketing? Editing Kit jumping in to add that in my parents' marriage, my mom does everything. And even when she was visiting family overseas and it was my teenage self and my dad, I took over everything. Even when she had a broken neck and pelvis, she still made dinner. And I looked at my parents' marriage and decided that's not what I want. And I have never, as this author says, raised a same-age boyfriend. I've also never met a man who needed raising. I don't know what circles she runs in, but if a man is incompetent until a woman shows him how to do something and then he does it with no problem, that doesn't sound like a man problem, that sounds like a parenting problem. And yes, weaponized incompetence is a thing, but that's not what this sounds like. Are their parents just not teaching their sons basic life skills on the basis that a woman will come along and do it for him? Because that's doing these men and their future partners a huge disservice if so. Of course, I also suspect the author is stretching the truth to drive home the point of her story, that she was smart to marry an older man. For me, my relationship with this age gap has alleviated this rush, permitted me to massage the clock, shift its hands to my benefit. Very soon, we will decide to have children, and I don't panic over last gasps of fun because I took so many big breaths of it early, on the holidays of someone who had worked a decade longer than I had, in beautiful places when I was young and beautiful, a symmetry I recommend. Yes, because it's just so easy to get a wealthy husband who will treat you well. Of course, I am assuming that he treats her well. He could treat her like an ornament. We really don't know. If such a thing as maternal energy exists, mine was never depleted. I spent the last nearly 7 years supported more than I support, and I am still not as old as my husband was when he met me. When I have a child, I will expect more help from him than I would if he were younger, for what does professional tenure earn you if not the right to set more limits on work demands? Or if not, to secure some childcare at the very least. When I return to work after maternal upheaval, he will aid me, as he's always had, with his ability to put himself aside, as younger men are rarely able. Above all, the great gift of my marriage is flexibility, a chance to live my life before I become responsible for someone else's, a lover's or a child's, a chance to write, a chance at a destiny that doesn't adhere rigidly to the routines and timelines of men, but lends itself instead to roomy accommodation to the very fluidity Betty Friedan dreamed of in 1963 in The Feminine Mystique, but we've largely forgotten. Some career or style of life that permits year-to-year variation, a full-time paid job in one community, part-time in another, exercise of professional skill and serious volunteer work, or a period of study during pregnancy or early motherhood when a full-time job is not feasible. Some things are just not feasible in our current structures. Somewhere along the way, we stopped admitting that, and all we did was make women feel like personal failures. I dream of new structures, a world in which women have entry-level jobs in their 30s. What? Alternate avenues for promotion, corporate ladders with balconies on which they can stand still, have a smoke, take a break, make a baby, enjoy themselves before they keep climbing. Perhaps men long for this in their own way. Actually, I am sure of that. Once, when we first fell in love, I put my head in his lap on a long car ride. I remember his hands on my face, the sun, the twisting turns of a mountain road, surprising and not surprising us like our romance, and his voice telling me that his biggest regret was I was so young, he feared he would lose me. Last week, we looked back at old photos and agreed we'd given each other our respective best years. Sometimes real equality is not so obvious, sometimes it takes turns, sometimes it takes almost a decade to reveal itself. Oh, there's so much. The title of this piece is misleading. It should be The Case for Marrying a Wealthy Man, because though she seems to believe that younger men need to be raised, she also talks about the privileges their relationship has afforded her. And well, just because a man has hit 30, that doesn't mean he'll have the income to support two people, especially not in a manner that allows for homes in two expensive cities. I do agree that we need new structures, a new way of working, and let's be honest, most men don't want to be married for money, and most women don't want to be married for their looks. If someone wants a transactional relationship, that's their business, but it seems to me a shaky foundation. What happens if he loses his money? What happens when she ages? This is the red pill stuff I mentioned before, where a man earns his value with time, money, and a woman loses hers with time, beauty. Hence the push for women to marry young. I also, of course, looked up the author after I filmed this, and I found this comment on her Twitter announcement of the article. An interesting take. There is almost a modern feminist rationale being made for a more traditional type of arrangement. The key concession is that the author recognizes the unfairness of biology for women. So much of modern Anglo-feminism tries to impose impose fairness through constructs. The idea that a young woman marrying an older man is an interesting take is almost comical, but I don't see the feminism in this article. She's basically doing what women were told to do in the 1940s. Go home so the men can have their jobs back and find yourself in the home and children. Except Gracie is doing this in the 21st century, so she does have options. The only question is if she chooses to use them or not. And that's fine. The issue is that she thinks this is what all young women should do, and, well, Gracie is 27 and has been married for 4 years. She's very smug and certain for having been married so short a time, and they haven't even added kids to the mix yet. It's very interesting that the folks advocating for women marrying young, marrying for money, are still young themselves, or are men. Seeing a lot of men praise this article.